The bouquet of flowers sat on the counter, vibrant and fragrant, a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to hum with life. Each stem was carefully chosen, reminiscent of the gardens his late wife had lovingly tended. Beside it lay a handwritten note, its edges slightly smudged from where his fingers had trembled while writing. "Emily," it began, "I'm so proud of the person you've become." But none of it mattered. Every gift he sent came back unopened, every message went unanswered. Emily's silence wasn't just absence, it was deafening, a void that echoed louder than any words could. Yet Dominic refused to give up. Years of searching, nights spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by the knowledge that somewhere out there was a daughter he'd never known, those years weighed too heavily for him to simply walk away now. Not when he'd finally found her. For Emily, though, Dominic's sudden appearance in her life unleashed a storm she hadn't been prepared for. She wanted to hate him, to dismiss him as another wealthy man trying to ease his guilt with grand gestures and empty apologies. But there was something about the way he looked at her, the raw vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke, that gnawed at her resolve. It infuriated her how much she wanted to believe him, how desperately she craved even the smallest shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone out there still cared. Hope, however, was dangerous. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. So she pushed him away, again and again, building walls higher each time he tried to scale them. She told herself this distance was safer, better, for both of them. But late at night, when the world fell silent and her thoughts grew loud, doubt crept in. Was she making a mistake? Could she let someone in, just this once? Did she have to be alone forever? The rain-slicked streets reflected the dim glow of streetlights as Dominic drove home, his mind tangled in knots of guilt and longing. The conversation at the cafe replayed over and over in his head, Emily's sharp words cutting deep, yet laced with a pain that mirrored his own. He couldn't forget the image of her storming out, shoulders rigid with anger, but her eyes betraying the turmoil beneath. For a fleeting moment, he thought he'd seen it, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough to fuel his determination. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, snapping him out of his thoughts. Without taking his eyes off the road, he glanced at the screen. It was his investigator, a call that rarely came unless it was urgent. Dominic's chest tightened as dread coiled within him. "Dominic," the investigator's voice came through, grave and clipped. "It's about Emily." Dominic's stomach plummeted. "What happened?" "She's been in a car accident. Looks like she lost control on a wet road. She's been taken to Memorial Hospital." For a moment, Dominic couldn't breathe. The words hit him like a freight train, dredging up memories he'd buried long ago, another accident, another call in the dead of night, another daughter in danger. Panic surged through him as he pressed harder on the accelerator, his heart pounding like a war drum. He couldn't lose her, not after everything, not when there was still a chance to fix what was broken. The drive felt endless, each red light mocking him, the rain blurring his vision until the world outside was little more than streaks of color. All that mattered was reaching Emily, seeing for himself that she was alive. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each more unbearable than the last. By the time he reached the hospital, his hands were trembling, his nerves frayed to their breaking point. He burst through the emergency room doors, his frantic gaze sweeping the space. A nurse tried to stop him, but he brushed past, desperation overriding any sense of decorum. And then he saw her, sitting upright on a hospital bed in one of the curtained-off areas, a nurse gently dabbing at a cut on her forehead. Relief crashed over him like a tidal wave, leaving him weak-kneed and breathless. She was hurt, but she was alive. "Emily," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. She looked up, her expression guarded but not as hostile as he'd expected. There was a vulnerability in her eyes, a chink in the wall she'd built between them. For the first time in years, she didn't look at him with pure hatred. Instead, she seemed confused, as if she were seeing him in a new light and didn't quite know what to make of it. "Dad," she said hesitantly, the word foreign on her tongue. It wasn't the venom-laced accusation she hurled at him before. It was softer, almost tentative, as if she were testing it out for the first time in years. Dominic's heart ached at the sound. He stepped closer, his hands trembling as he reached out, but stopped himself before touching her, afraid of overstepping. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. "What happened?" Emily hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if trying to decipher whether his concern was genuine. I wasn't paying attention," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The roads were wet, and I lost control." Dominic's chest tightened at the thought of how much worse it could have been. "Thank God you're okay," he murmured, his voice trembling. He wanted to say more, to tell her how terrified he'd been, how much she meant to him, but the words caught in his throat. For now, all that mattered was that she was alive. That she was here. Ask explained.